1 second, sir. Okay, so Hare Krishna to all of you, and very happy to meet you all. I'm so sorry that there's been a break for a couple of weeks in between. It was very, very tight. We had the wonderful opportunity of serving His Holiness Jayapataka Swami Maharaj.
We cannot see you.
Okay, so we had the great opportunity of hosting His Holiness Jayapataka Swami Maharaj at home. Our home was converted into a full-fledged ashram with many rooms taken over by Maharaj and his servants. And every evening was at least 30-40 people visiting home. So it was 10-11 days of nectar and association that we had with His Holiness Jayapataka Swami Maharaj. So it was too tight for me. Forgive me for missing a few classes, but I think we are going to start off today, continuing with where we left on the Bhagavad Gita. So chapter 12 is one of the most important chapters of Bhagavad Gita. And before we get there, let's quickly cover what we already did in the 11th chapter, just to give a quick overview and then take on to the stage on the 12th chapter. Now, in the 11th chapter, okay, and even before I go there, let me just start off with the opening prayers. And this particular chapter 12 is called Devotional Service. How can we serve the Lord in Bhakti Yoga? So let's get on the Mangalacharan. Om Ajnanati Mirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Nena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Mena Bhutale Swayamrupakatamahim Dadati Swapatantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttapadakam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sabdvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesh Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. This gives a summary of the 11th chapter, though I'll go backtrack to a few verses. In the 11th chapter, basically we see that Arjuna is freed from illusion after hearing the most confidential instructions. And he fully accepts Lord Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And to fulfill Arjuna's desire, Lord Krishna grants him divine vision. Divyam dadamite chakshuhu, Krishna says, grants divine vision with which to see it, the Vishwarupa. He wanted to see the Vishwarupa, his majestic and terrifying Vishwarupa, the universal form. Krishna shows his universal form full of opulences, demigods, and time. Arjuna is very astonished seeing this spectacular vision and offers his prayers. The brilliant, powerful radiance frightens him as it threatens to burn the whole creation. Arjuna sees entire opposing army along with his own soldiers rushing into Krishna's many mouths, meeting their death. Arjuna is then implored by Krishna to be an instrument. He says, Nimitta matram bhava savya sachin. Be an instrument for execution of Krishna's plan in the great fight and thus be assured of victory. Arjuna offers his prayers and obeisances to the Lord, begs Krishna to forgive him for his familiar dealings. Disturbed and horrified by the universal form, he begs Krishna to return back to his two-handed form. Saumya Vapu. He says, I want to see your Saumya Vapu. Then Krishna explains, his beautiful two-armed form is inconceivable even to demigods. and is beyond understanding by Vedic study, penance, charity, and worship. His transcendental form can only be understood by the process of bhakti. That's the background of how the Lord covered on the 11th chapter. And before we get into that particular detail, let me just quickly go on to some of the verses of the 11th chapter. Just give me a minute here. So let me say that here is a particular place where first Arjuna is first requesting to see the Vishwarupa form in full. After he's seen the Vishwarupa form, he's completely bewildered and he's perturbed, disturbed, and he's not able to behold the form of the Lord in that particular form. And then he says, you are the Supreme Lord. And then he's praying to the Lord. Oh, as a father tolerates the impudence of his son, a friend the impertinence of a friend, or a husband the familiarity of his wife, please tolerate the wrongs I may have done to you. So this is in the Aishwarya Bhav. Then he says, after seeing the universal form, which I have never seen before, I'm gladdened, but at the same time, my mind is disturbed with fear. Therefore, please bestow your grace upon me and reveal again your form as the personality of Godhead, O Lord of Lords. Okay. Then the Lord is then showing him his four-handed form. O thousand-armed Lord, I wish to see you in your four-armed form with helmeted head, with club, wheel, conch, and lotus flower in your hands. I long to see you in that form. He's getting a good bonus. Then the Lord says, I'm very happy. Oh, my dear Arjuna, happily I have shown to you my internal potency, this supreme universal form within the material world. No one before you has ever seen this primal form, unlimited and full of glaring effulgence. And he says, oh, best of Kuru warriors, no one before you have ever seen this universal form of mine, for neither by studying the Vedas, nor by performing sacrifices, nor by charity, nor by pious activities, nor by severe penances can I be seen in this form in this material world. Then he says, you have been perturbed and bewildered by seeing this horrible feature of mine. Now let it be finished. My devotee, be free again from all these disturbances. With a peaceful mind, now you can see the form you desire. After showing the two-arm form, after showing the four-arm form. Now Sanjay is saying that the Supreme Person of God, Krishna, having spoken thus to Arjuna, displayed his real four-arm form and at last showed his two-arm form, thus encouraging the fearful Arjuna. Now, Arjuna is now looking at him and says, Drishtvedam manusham rupam tava saumyam janardana idani must be samvrittaha sachetaha prakritim gataha. When Arjuna thus saw Krishna in his original form, he said, what did he say here? Manusham rupam tava saumyam janardana idani must be sachetaha prakritim gataha. So manusham rupam. When Arjuna thus saw Krishna in his original form, he said, oh Janardana, seeing this human life form, so very beautiful, I am now composed in my mind and I am restored to my original nature. Now we have all fallen off from the spiritual world, away from the spiritual nature, not understanding our original nature. And if you get to see this amazing form of the Lord as Shama Sundara, as Krishna, as Janardana, as Arjuna is addressing him, in this human-like form, two-handed form, so beautiful form. Now, Arjuna is getting composed and Arjuna says, I am getting restored to my original nature, sachetaha, in my consciousness, prakritim sachetaha. Then the Lord says, again, hey Arjuna, this form, my dear Arjuna, this form of mine, you are now seeing is very difficult to behold. Now, not that the Vishwarupa was difficult to behold, even this two-arm form is most rarely achieved by people. You are now seeing is very difficult to behold. Even the demigods are ever seeking the opportunity to see the form which is so dear. Then he says, the form you're seeing with your transcendental eyes cannot be understood simply by studying the Vedas. Again, looking like repeating. Earlier he said, seeing the Vishwarupa form cannot be seen and understood by study of Vedas. Because Krishna is giving it. Because Krishna is allowing him to see it, he's getting to see it. Now Krishna says the same of his two-handed form. He says, you're seeing it with your transcendental eyes, cannot be understood simply by studying the Vedas, nor by undergoing serious penances, nor by charity, nor by worship. It is not by these means that one can see me as I am. Tattvataha, he says. Na? So, naham vedairna tapasa na dhanena chejjaya shakya evam vido drashtum. Shakya evam vido drashtum. Okay? It is only possible. Okay? How he says, Drishtavan asi mamyata. So, only if it is not by these means that one can see me as I am. I can be seen. This form cannot be seen by any other way except when I am displaying it to you. Then the Lord says, very important verse here, Bhaktya tu ananyaya shakya aham evam vidorjuna jnatum drashtum cha tattvena praveshtum cha parantapa. Jnatum drashtum cha tattvena, in tattvataha. If you want to understand Krishna in reality, he says, Bhaktya tu ananyaya shakya. Then without ananyaya, without being mixed in any other way, Bhaktya, only by bhakti, and bhakti without mixture of all the other modes. Only then can you see me. My dear Arjuna, only by undivided devotional service can I be seen or understood as I am standing before you, and can thus be seen directly. So it's not that the Lord cannot be seen. The Lord is being seen directly by Arjuna as Krishna is standing right in front. Earlier also he was seeing Krishna, but he didn't see Krishna in Tattvata. He did not realize who he was seeing. He thought he was seeing his friend. He was seeing another special person. But now he's able to see the Lord after having gone through all this journey, seeing the Vishwarupa, seeing the four-arm form, and now when he's seeing the two-arm form, he's able to understand Tattvata, who Krishna is, standing before you, and can thus be seen directly. Only in this way can you enter into the mysteries of my understanding. What is the most important word here? Is by undivided devotional service. That's why the next chapter that we're going to cover is called devotional service, Bhakti Yoga. Before getting on to that, then I think we have a couple more of verses here. And he says, what can you do? Mat karma karan mat paramo mat bhakta sangavarjitaha nirvaira sarvabhuteshu yah samameti pandava. My dear Arjuna, he who engages in my pure devotional service, free from contaminations of fruitive activities and mental speculation, he who works for me, who makes me the supreme goal of his life, and who is friendly to every living being, he certainly comes to me. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. This is a very, very important verse. Okay, this is the last verse in this particular chapter. And so let's get on to the summary back again in the 12th chapter. Now, coming after the 11, in the 12, in the 11, Lord Krishna shows his universal form, and Arjuna's attachment to personal two-handed form is being described here very nicely. From the Vishwarupa, he gets to the two-handed form, right? Then now where does chapter 12 take you? It's called devotional service. Arjuna, being attached to two-handed form, now wants to clarify his position. He's asking many more questions. He says, hey Krishna, how can I understand you? And he still has, all of us have this understanding of Krishna in the impersonal form, Advaita form, or in his personal form. So Arjuna again asks questions on that front. After hearing and seeing Lord's inestimable impersonal opulences, Arjuna again wants to hear about devotional service. And to clarify the position as a devotee who works for Krishna, as opposed to a jnani who renounces work, and to clarify his position as being attached to the personal form of Krishna as superior to the universal form or the unmanifest Brahman. So this is very, very important. So this particular chapter establishes it. So in the first few verses, this particular chapter has got three sections. Shlokas 1 to 7 talks about the superiority of bhakti over impersonalism, personal form over impersonal form. And direct questions are being asked by Arjuna, and Krishna gives a direct answer to Arjuna in this first section. And then he talks about the progressive stages of devotion, from the highest to the lowest. And then he says the qualities that endear one to Krishna. What should we be doing as a bhakta, as a devotee, so that we can be more attracted to Krishna, we can serve Krishna better. So this particular chapter is called Bhakti Yoga, right? Devotional service. So in section A, again, 1 to 7, we have 3 splits. In verses 1 to 2, Krishna says, one who fixed his mind on Krishna, worshipping him with great transcendental faith, is considered more perfect than one who worships the unmanifest, inconceivable, impersonal form. So this is a very, very clear undertaking of Krishna, because many times we are confused between people following an impersonal Advaita philosophy to the personal philosophy. Sometimes they think, oh, Advaita philosophy is higher, okay? And at the bhakti, when you are at a personal level of worshipping the Lord and the form, then that is a lower stage than worshipping the Lord without the form. However, Krishna has a different opinion here. Let's understand what Krishna says here. And then he says, worshippers of the impersonal make advancement with great difficulty. It's not easy to worship in the impersonal form of the Lord. Krishna personally delivers the devotees who are undeviatedly devoted to him. When you start worshipping the personal form of the Lord, Krishna himself comes forward to help you to progress in devotional service. Okay, so just 1 second. Are we all in? You're able to hear me?
Yes, yes,
sir.
yes. Yes, Prabhu.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Now let's get on. So how in Bhagavad Gita, this particular concept of bhakti is being developed over various chapters. In the 2nd chapter itself, the Lord talked in 261. What did he say about bhakti in chapter 2, verse 61, where he was already developing the concept? He says, Tani sarvani samyamya yukta asita matparaha vashehi yasya indriyani tasya prajna pratishrita. One who restrains his senses, keeping them under full control, and fixes his consciousness upon me is known as a man of steady intelligence. So Krishna says, meditate upon me. That is 261. In chapter 3, verse 30, again, the Lord is saying, Mayi sarvani karmani sanyasya adhyatma chetasa nirashir nirmamo bhutva yudhyasva vigatajwaraha. Therefore, O Arjuna, surrendering all your works unto me with full knowledge of me, without desires for profit, with no claims to proprietorship, and free from lethargy, fight. So Krishna says, surrender unto me with full knowledge of me, understand me. He's gradually developing the concept of how Arjuna should surrender to Krishna. And then in the chapter 4, verse number 9, Krishna says, Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tatvataha tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti mameti. So Arjuna, one who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in the material world, but attains my eternal abode. Just by knowing that Krishna's appearance, Janma, Karma, and his activities are very transcendental, are not normal birth, etc., and activities. Just knowing that Krishna is supreme, he says, upon leaving the body, what we will do? We can take, we will, upon leaving the body, takes his birth again in this material world, does not take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode. Just knowing that Krishna's activities are transcendental. So gradually he's developing that if you know me, that is ultimate. Now in chapter 5, he says, Bhoktaram yajna tapasam. This is the last verse of chapter 5 now. He says, Bhoktaram yajna tapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhridam sarvabhutanam nyatva mam shantim prachati. So it says, a person in full consciousness of me, that I am sarvaloka maheshwaram, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities. If you know him, then what happens? We attain peace from the pangs of material miseries. Then gradually moving to 6th chapter. In the 6th chapter, Krishna says in verse 14, Prashantatma vigatabir brahmachari vrate stitaha manasamyamma matchitto yukta asita matparaha matchitto. Thus, with unagitated, subdued mind, devoid of figure, completely free from sex life. One should meditate upon me within the heart and make me the object and goal of life. And then he says in the very next verse, Yunjan evam sadatmanam yogi niyatamanasah shantim nirvana paramam mat samstam adhigacchati. Thus practicing constant control of the body, mind, and activities, the mystic transcendentalist is mind regulated, attains to the kingdom of God by cessation of material existence. And then in verse number 30, in the 6th chapter, he says, Yomam pashyati sarvatra sarvam chamai pashyati tasyaham na pranashyami sachamena pranashyati. There's a very, very important verse also. And here he says, for one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. So we have to always be looking at Krishna. You see anything, you see it as an opulence of Krishna. You see anything good, you see that as a mercy of Krishna. And, and sees everything in Krishna. When you see the beauty of Krishna, you think, oh, he is the Supreme Lord. He is everything. He is my only Supreme Personality of Godhead. For him, Krishna says, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. Then in verse 47, which is the last verse of chapter 6, Krishna says, Yoginam api sarvesham madgatena antaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yovam same yukta tamomataha. Out of all the yogis, he's already described the karma yogi, jnana yogi, etc., dhyana yogi. Now he says, out of all the yogis, yoginam api sarvesham madgatena antaratmana, whoever has his full thoughts upon me. And of all yogis, the one with great faith, who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, renders transcendental loving service to me. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. Same yukta tamo mataha. That is my opinion, Krishna says. And then gradually moving on to verse number 7, Krishna says, Maya saktamana partha yogam yunjan madashrayah asamshayam samagrammam yatagnyaseti tatshruno. Now here, O son of Pritha, how by practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, do your activities, but in full consciousness of me. He says, with mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt. So again and again. Then he says, Devi Jesha Gunamai, Mama Maya Duratyaya, Mamevaye Prapadyante, Maya Netam Tarantite. 7:14, he says, this divine energy of mind, consisting of 3 modes of mental nature, is difficult to overcome. But those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. So the nature is very, very difficult to cross. But if you surrender unto me, Mamevaye Prapadyante, Maya Metam Tarantite, tar sakte hain. Only if you have surrendered unto me. So otherwise it says, Mama Maya Duratya. His Maya is very difficult to cross over. Then Krishna says, a person who is on his final stages of life, how can he also attain the Lord? Antakale chamameva smaran muktva kalevaram yaprayati samadbhavam yati nastyatra samshayah. And whoever at the end of his life quits his body, remembering me alone, mam eva, he says, at once attains my nature. Of this, there is no doubt. Then he says, yam yam vapi smaram bhavam tyajatyante kalevaram tam tamevaiti kaunteya sada tad bhava bhavitaha. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kuti, that state he will attain without fail. And then he says, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu, therefore at all times, mam anusmara yudhyacha. Fight the battle by thinking of me. Anusmara means go on remembering me. It's very important for us to always smaranam, to always think of the Lord. Then he says, Mayyarpittamano buddhihi mame vaishyati asamshaya. Therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. And finally, in the next verse of the same series, he says, Abhyasa yoga yuktena chetasa nanyagamina paramam purusham divyam yati partanu chintayan. He who meditates on me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path, he, O Partha, is sure to reach me. So again, he's gradually building it up for all of us to take us through. Now in verse 14, he says, Ananya chetaha satatam yomam smarati nityashah tasyaham sulava partha nityayuktasya yoginaha. For one who always remembers me without deviation, I am easy to obtain. O son of Pritha, because of his constant engagement in devotional service. So this is very, very important. And then it jumps to a very important verse in the 9th chapter. Manmana bhava mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mame vaishyati yuktvaivam atmanam mad parayanaha. This is written here as the essence of the essence of the essence of the essence. Most important verse. Engage your mind always in thinking of me. Become my devotee and offer obeisances to me. Worship me. Be completely absorbed in me. Surely you will come to me. And then is the Chatushloki that we covered in verses 8, 9, 10, and 11. Again, the Lord is covering the same. Aham sarvasya prabho matta sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samannitaha. I'm the source of all. He's explaining about himself. I'm the source of all spiritual material worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise, the intelligent person who perfectly knows this engages in my devotional service. Iti matva bhajante mam. Bhajan, bhakti. The bhaja is the root form of bhakti. So he says, those who know that I am the supreme and they worship me and they think I am everything, then they know that everything emanates from me. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. Then he says, mat chitta, mat gata prana, mat, mera chinta karte hue. Mat chitta, mat gata prana, bhodayantaha parasparam, katentasya mam nityam, tushyanti charamanti cha. The thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to my service, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. So when devotees meet, they do nothing but talk about Krishna, glorify him. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam, again bhajatam, priti purvakam, very happily they are worshipping Krishna. Dadami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayantite. Those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. Then the last verse of the Chatushloki, he says, Tesham evanukam partam aham ajnanajam tamaha nashayami atma bhavasto jnanadipena bhasvata. To show such people special mercy, I, Krishna says, dwelling in their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. And then are the verses that we covered today, verses 11, 54 and 55, where he says, Bhaktya tu ananyaya shakya. Ananya bhakti. He's talking about Bhaktya tu ananyaya shakya. Aham evam vidorjuna. I can be understood as I am. Jnatum drashtum cha tatvena. You can know me, drashtum. You can see me. How? Cha tatvena. In truth. Praveshtum cha parantapa. Only by undeviated devotional service can I be understood as I am standing before you, and thus be seen directly. Only in this way can you enter into the mysteries of my understanding. And the last verse that is being quoted here, before we jump to verse chapter 12, is Mat karma kridn mat paramo mad bhakta sangavarjitaha nirvairaha sarva bhuteshu samameti pandava. Yes, samameti pandava. He who engages in pure devotional service, free from contaminations of fruitive activities and mental speculation. He who works for me, who makes the supreme goal of his life, and who is friendly to every living being, he certainly comes to me. So this verse, 1155, is considered also one of the most important verses of the Bhagavad Gita. So let's jump on now. So how the Lord has taken through how bhakti is important through all the chapters. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And now we are jumping to what is really Bhakti Yoga. So let's move to Bhakti Yoga. Let's cover text number 1 in Bhakti Yoga. As usual, you can unmute yourself and chant after me. Arjuna Uvacha.
Arjuna Uvacha.
Evam Satata Yuktaye. Bhaktas-tvam paryupasate.
Bhaktas-tvam paryupasate.
Ye chapyaksharam avyaktam.
Ye chapyaksharamavyatam.
Tesham ke yoga vittamaha.
Tesham ke yoga vittamaha.
This whole 12th chapter is it's a very small chapter, just 20 verses. Many people have this chapter by heart. It's very, very important. Arjuna Uvacha. Arjuna said, Evam, thus, satata, always, yukta, engaged, ye, those who, bhaktaha, devotees, tvam, you, paryupasate, properly worship, ye, those who, sha, also, api, again, aksharam, beyond the senses, avyaktam, the unmanifested, tesham, of them, ke, who, yoga vittamaha, the most perfect in knowledge of yoga. Translation. Arjuna inquired, which are considered, now Arjuna is asking a question, which are considered to be more perfect? Those who are always properly engaged in your devotional service, or those who worship the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifest? Evam satat bhattasvam paryupase echapi aksharam avyaktam. Yeah, tesham ke yoga vittamaha, those who perform yoga. And yoga here means the bhakti yoga part. So somebody can read the purport for us.
Hare Krishna, may I?
Yes, Maithiliji.
Krishna has now explained about the personal and impersonal and the universal, and has described all kinds of devotees and yogis. Generally, the transcendentalists can be divided into two classes. One is the impersonalists and the other is the personalists. The personalist devotees engages himself with all energy in the service of the Supreme Lord. The impersonalist also engages himself not directly in the service of Krishna, but in meditation on the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested. We find in this chapter that of the different process of realization of the absolute truth, Bhakti Yoga, devotional service, is the highest. If one at all desires to have the association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then he must take a devotional service. Those who worship the Supreme Lord directly by devotional service are called personalists. Those who engage themselves in meditation on the impersonal Brahman are called impersonalists. Arjuna is here questioning which position is better. There are different ways to realize the absolute truth, but Krishna indicates in this chapter that Bhakti Yoga or devotional service to him is the highest of all. It is the most direct and it is the easiest mean of association with Godhead. In the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Lord explained that living entity is not the material body. He is a spiritual spark, and the absolute truth is spiritual whole. In the seventh chapter, he spoke of the living entity as being part and parcel of the supreme whole and recommended that he transfer his attention fully to the whole. Then again, in the eighth chapter, it was said that anyone who thinks of Krishna at the time of quitting his body is at once transferred to the spiritual sky, to the abode of Krishna. And at the end of the sixth chapter, the Lord clearly said that of all yogis, one who always thinks of Krishna within himself is considered the most perfect. So, in practically every chapter, the conclusion has been that one should be attached to the personal form of Krishna, for that is the highest spiritual realization. Nevertheless, there are those who are not attached to the personal form of Krishna. They are so firmly detached that even in the preparation of commentaries to Bhagavad Gita, they want to distract other people from Krishna and transfer all devotion to the impersonal Brahma Jyoti. They prefer to meditate on the impersonal form of the absolute truth, which is beyond the reach of the senses and is not manifest. And so, factually, there are two classes of transcendentalists. Now, Arjuna is trying to settle the question of which process is easier and which of the classes is most perfect. In other words, he is clarifying his own position because he is attached to the personal form of Krishna. He is not attached to the impersonal Brahman. He wants to know whether his position is secure. The impersonal manifestation, either in this material world or in the spiritual world or of the Supreme Lord, is a problem for meditation. Actually, one cannot perfectly conceive of the impersonal feature of the absolute truth. Therefore, Arjuna wants to say, what is the use of such a waste of time? Arjuna experienced in the 11th chapter that to be attached to the personal form of Krishna is the best because he could thus understand all other forms at the same time and there was no disturbance to his love for Krishna. The important question asked of Krishna by Arjuna will clarify the distinction between the impersonal and personal conceptions of the absolute truth. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So the question is, which is more perfect? Engaging in devotional service or worshippers of the impersonal Brahman? And I think this question appears to every one of us because every one of us have come upon both of these conceptions throughout our life. Impersonalism is even more concept than a personal concept of worshipping the Lord in his personal form. So Arjuna also has the same question. And he says, fine, Krishna, now I am actually attracted to your two-handed form. And yes, you have showed me also to say that, this is most important. But he still has a few questions and he is direct in asking, which is better? Personalist, what does he do? He engages himself with all energy in the service of the Supreme Lord. And the impersonalist engages in meditation on the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested. These are the two types. And what does Arjuna think of the other processes? Worship of impersonal feature, Arjuna feels, is a waste of time, since no one can perfectly conceive of impersonal feature of the absolute truth. And the personal form of Krishna is best because all other forms could be understood and no disturbance to love for Krishna. So in the earlier verses, Arjuna also understood that once you understand Krishna, Krishna is the ultimate. One of his expansions is the four-handed form, and one of his expansion is the Vishwarupa form. So you understand Krishna, you understand every form, and not only just the form of Krishna as Vishnu or the form of Krishna as Vishwarupa, of all the gods and demigods. That's the conclusion. Then every chapter of Bhagavad Gita ends with how it moves, and we already covered that. The second chapter says living entity is a spiritual spark, and absolute truth is a spiritual whole. And then in 647 it says Bhakti Yoga is the best of all yogis. Those who are surrendering completely to me and thinking of me is the best. Then in chapter 7 again he says living entity is part and parcel of the whole. And he recommends one to transfer his full attention to the whole. Why are you concerned about the part? Focus on the whole. And then he says anyone who thinks of Krishna at the time of death at once goes to the spiritual sky, to the abode of Krishna. The only way to have association of the Supreme Person of Godhead is through devotional service. Now, I just wanted to add a couple of points, expanding on the question that he's asking. Arjuna now asks a question here. There are those who desire Paramatma, who being constantly absorbed in you by the process thus described, evam, in verses such as Maya, Saktamana, Partha, etc. Worship you. Sham Sundra Krishna with everything, body, senses, and mind. There are also those who desiring Paramatma who first worship the Jiva Swarupa, the Aksharam, which is invisible to the material senses, and who endeavor to realize the Jiva as Akshara by Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. Of the two types of people, which persons have the quickest process for reaching the goal? Yoga Vittamaha, who are Vittama, who are really capable of moving ahead faster. So what it says, Yoga Vittama, the most perfect in knowledge. Who are most perfect? That's a direct question asked by Arjuna. Again, expanding on the meaning of this. One process is to attain the Lord by first realizing Atma, then by meditating on the Lord. Since the Jiva is the source of bondage, the realization of Atma, one becomes free of obstacles and then can attain the Lord. But because of difficulty in meditating on the Jivatma, which is very small and formless, can the goal really be accomplished by meditation on the Atma? The other process is exclusive bhakti to the Lord, which quickly destroys all obstacles and yields realization of the Lord. The practitioners become completely absorbed in that bhakti. Of all the processes followed by these two types of persons, Tesham, which is the best process? Oh Krishna, please tell me. That was the only question that Arjuna asked. And then Krishna starts off with an answer immediately. Sri Bhagavan Vacha.
Sri
Bhagavan
Bhagavan
Vacha.
Maya Veshya Mano Ye Mam.
Maya Veshya Mano Ye Mam.
Nitya Yukta Upasate.
Nitya Yukta Upasate.
Shraddhaya Parayopetaha.
Shraddhaya Parayopetas.
Eme Yukta Tamamata.
Teme Yukta Tamamata.
So, Tamamataha. My opinion is that this is the best. He straight away starts with the best. Sri Bhagavan Vacha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Mai, upon me, Aveshya, fixing, Manaha, the mind, Ye, those who, Mam, me, me, Nitya, always, Yuktaha, engaged, Upasate, worship, Shraddhaya, with faith, Paraya, transcendental, Upetaha, endowed, Te, they, me, by me, Yukta Tamaha, most perfect in yoga, Mataha, are considered. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, those who fix their minds on my personal form and are always engaged in worshipping me with great and transcendental faith are considered by me to be most perfect. Somebody can read the purport, please.
May I read, Prabhu?
Nalinji, yes.
Yes. Perfect. In answer to Arjuna's question, Krishna clearly says that he who concentrates upon his personal form and who worships him with faith and devotion is to be considered most perfect in yoga. For one in such Krishna consciousness, there is no material activities because everything is done by Krishna. A pure devotee is constantly engaged. Sometimes he chants, sometimes he hears or reads book about Krishna, or sometimes he cooks prasadam or goes to the marketplace to purchase something for Krishna, or sometimes he washes the temple or the dishes. Whatever he does not let a single moment pass without devoting his activities to Krishna. Such action is in full samadhi.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So, just to expand on that slightly. So, the Lord being asked answers, those devotees who worship me with very firm faith, Paraya, Shraddhaya, Paraya, Peta, he says, continuously absorbing their minds in me, who is Swayam Bhagavan, I am the Supreme Lord, the son of Devaki, having the complexion of blue lotus as well as other qualities, who worship me with hearing and other methods, and who desire an eternal relationship with me, Nitya Yuktaha, are considered by me to be most qualified. They have the method for most quickly attaining me. Yukta Tamaha, Teme Yukta Tamamataha. He says, Shraddhaya Parayopeta, Maya Veshya Mano Yemam, those who worship me with all their minds and applying all the devotion service unto me. Nitya Yukta Upasate. Bhakti Yoga is Nitya. So daily worship me at all times. Shraddhaya Parayopeta with Shraddha. Teme Yukta Tamamataha. They are the ultimate. So let's get to this particular verse here. So who is most perfect? Those who fix their minds on my personal form, worship me with great and transcendental faith, and always engage in worshiping me. So three things: fix minds on his personal form, worship him with great transcendental faith. Faith is important, personal form is important, and satatam, always engage in worshiping me. Yukta tama means always worshipped in engaging in worshiping me. So, what are the actions in Krishna consciousness? Are not material, because whatever you do, it may look material, but if you are offering it to Krishna, all those activities become spiritual. In a temple, in devotional service, any activity you do, whether it may be cooking for the Lord, doing abhishek for the Lord, cleaning his temple, receiving guests, whatever we do in the service of Krishna becomes devotional service. A pure devotee is in full samadhi because of his constant engagement. And what are the various types of engagement? Chants, hears, cooks. He purchases things for Krishna, he washes at the temple or dishes, and he does not waste a single moment of his time. So let's then move on to verse 3 and 4. So the first verse, Krishna straight away says, this is ultimately. Okay? Then he gives a view. What does one who is worshipping the impersonal feature have to do? He gives a long list of how they can also be purified. So let's understand this. Etu aksharamanir deshyam avyaktam paryupasate
Avyaktam paryupasate
sarvatragam achintyam cha
sarvatrakam achintyam cha
kutastam achalam dhruvam
kutastam achalam dhruvam
sanniyamyendriya gramam
gramam
sarvatra samabuddhayah
sarvatra samabudhayah
te prapnuvanti mameva
te prapnuvanti mameva
sarvabhutahite ratah.
sarvabhutahite rataah.
The first form is that just think of me, do your activities thinking you're doing it for me, and you will attain perfection. Now he's giving a long process. Let's understand that. A, those who, two, but aksharam, that which is beyond the perception of the senses, nirdeshyam, indefinite, avyaktam, unmanifested, paryupasate, completely engaged in worshipping, sarvatragam, all pervading, achintyam, inconceivable, cha, also, kutastam, unchanging, achalam, immovable, dhruvam, fixed, sanniyamya, controlling, indriya gramam, all the senses, sarvatra, everywhere, samabuddhayaha, equally disposed, they, prapnuvanti, achieve, mam, me, eva, certainly, mameva, they also achieve me, in short. Sarva bhuta hite, for the welfare of all living beings. Rataha, engaged. But those who fully worship the unmanifested, that which lies beyond the perception of the senses, the all-pervading, inconceivable, unchanging, fixed and immovable, the impersonal conception of the absolute truth, by controlling the various senses and being equally disposed to everyone, such persons engaged in the welfare of one, welfare of all, at last achieve me. Somebody can read the purport, please.
Can I read, Prabhu?
Yes.
Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Those who do not directly worship the Supreme Godhead, Krishna, but who attempt to achieve the same goal by an indirect process, also ultimately achieve the same goal, Sri Krishna. After many births, the man of wisdom seeks refuge in me, knowing that Vasudeva is all. When a person comes to full knowledge after many births, he surrenders unto Lord Krishna. If one approaches the Godhead by the method mentioned in this verse, he has to control the senses, render service to everyone, and engage in the welfare of all beings. It is inferred that one has to approach Lord Krishna, otherwise there is no perfect realization. Often there is much penance involved before one fully surrenders unto him. In order to perceive the super soul within the individual soul, one has to cease the sensual activities of seeing, hearing, tasting, working, etc. Then one comes to understand that the Supreme Soul is present everywhere. Realizing this, one envies no living entity. He sees no difference between man and animal because he sees soul only, not the outer covering. But for the common man, this method of impersonal realization is very difficult. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. So now you see here the picture. It shows what does impersonal realization mean. Characteristics of the impersonal conception. One, unmanifested. beyond sense perception. Very difficult to understand it, because earlier also we saw that for those of us who are embodied, it is difficult for us to conceive of the Lord in the unmanifest form. Then it is all pervading, means everywhere, inconceivable, unchanging, fixed, immovable. And how to worship the unmanifested? By controlling various senses. Yeah. So if you see those who get into the Advaitic form, technically it means you shouldn't get married, you should be a sannyasi, you should have no attachment to anything else in life. By being fully equally disposed to everyone, by engaging in welfare of all, and difficulty for any common man. It is very difficult for any common man. Much penance is involved before ultimate realization of full surrender takes place. Okay. But on the other hand, the Lord says, now here he says, will at last come to me. Then he's explaining it even more here in this verse by indicating how much difficult it is to worship in the impersonal form. And let's understand that. Klesho adhikataras tesham.
Klesho
Tesham
Avyakta sakta chetasam.
Avyaktasam
Avyakta hi gatir dukkham.
Avyaktashigatir
Dehavadbhir avapyate.
Dehavadbhir.
This one verse, Krishna is summing up the two processes. Klesho. Klesha means all difficulty, trouble. This Kali Yuga. Klesha means complete problem. Klesho. What type of klesha? Adhika taraha. Bahut adhik klesha hai. Very, very difficult klesha. Adhika taraha. Very much. Tesham. Of them. Avyakta asakta chetasam. To those, avyakta means the unmanifested. Asakta, who are attached to it. Chetasam. Of those whose minds are attached to the unmanifested form. It is very, very difficult and troublesome, Krishna says. Then, avyaktahi gatir dukkham. And those who are going in the unmanifest form of worship, he certainly, gatihi, progress, dukkham, with trouble, dehavadbihi, by those of us who are embodied, avapyate, is achieved. For those whose minds are attached to the unmanifested impersonal feature of the Supreme, advancement is very troublesome. To make progress in that discipline is always difficult for those who are embodied. Point blank answer by Krishna. So we shouldn't have any room for doubt, but still people continue to have room for doubt. Purport. Somebody would like to read it? A long purport, so we split it to two.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Shall I read?
Yes.
Purport to Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. The group of transcendentalists who follow the path of the inconceivable, unmanifested, impersonal feature of the Supreme Lord are called Jnana Yogis. And Krishna and person who are in full Krishna consciousness engaged in devotional service to the Lord are called Bhakti Yogis. Now here the difference between Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga is definitely expressed. The process of Jnana Yoga, although ultimately bringing one to the same goal, is very troublesome. Whereas the path of Bhakti Yoga, the process of being in direct service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is easier and is natural for the embodied soul. The individual soul is embodied since time immemorial. It is very difficult for him to simply theoretically understand that he is not the body. Therefore, the Bhakti Yoga accepts the deity of Krishna as worshipable because there is some bodily conception fixed in the mind, which can thus be applied. Of course, worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his form within the temple is not idol worship. There is evidence in the Vedic literature that worship may be saguna or nirguna of the supreme processing or non-processing attributes. Worship of the deity in the temple is saguna worship. For the Lord is represented by material qualities, but the form of the Lord, though represented by material qualities such as stone, wood, or oil paint, is not actually the material. That is the absolute nature of the Supreme Lord. Shall I continue, Prabhu?
Please continue this paragraph. Go ahead.
A crude example may be given here. We may find some mailboxes on the street, and if we post our letters in those boxes, they will naturally go to their destination without difficulty. But any old box or an imitation which we may find somewhere but which is not authorized by the post office will not do the work. Similarly, God has an authorized representation in the deity form, which is called Archa Vigraha. This Archa Vigraha is an incarnation of the Supreme Lord. God will accept service through that form. The Lord is omnipotent, all-powerful. Therefore, by his incarnation as Archa Vigraha, he can accept the services of the devotee, just to make it convenient for the man in conditional life.
Thank
Hare
you.
Krishna.
Anybody
Thank
else
you,
would
Prabhu.
like to read the remaining purport? Yes, madam.
I'm sorry, where has he
If you want
left?
to read, go ahead.
No, where has he left? I missed
Now,
it.
so far a devotee.
So for a devotee, there is no difficulty approaching the Supreme immediately and directly. But for those who are following the impersonal way to spiritual realization, the path is difficult. They have to understand the unmanifested representation of the Supreme through such Vedic literatures as the Upanishads, and they have to learn the language, understand the non-perceptual feelings, and realize all these processes. This is not very easy for a common man. Person in Krishna consciousness engaged in the devotional service simply by the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, simply by offering regulative obeisance unto the deity, simply by hearing the glories of the Lord, and simply by eating the remnants of the foodstuffs offered to the Lord, realizes the Supreme Personality of Godhead very easily. There is no doubt that impersonalists are unnecessarily taking a troublesome path with the risk of not realizing the absolute truth at the ultimate end. But the personalist, without any risk, trouble, or difficulty, approaches the Supreme Personality directly. A similar passage appears in Srimad Bhagavatam. It is stated there that if one ultimately has to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this surrendering process is called bhakti, but instead takes the trouble to understand what is Brahman and what is not Brahman, and spends the whole life in that way, the result is simply troublesome. Therefore, it is advised here that one should not take up this troublesome path of the self-realization, because there is uncertainty in the ultimate result. Uncertainty in the ultimate result. A living entity is entirely an individual soul, and if he wants to merge into the spiritual whole, he may accomplish the realization of the eternal and knowledgeable aspects of his original nature, but the blissful portion is not realized. By the grace of some devotee, such as transcendentalist, highly learned in the process of the Jnana Yoga, may come to the point of Bhakti Yoga or devotional service. At that time, long practice in impersonalism also becomes a source of trouble, because he cannot give up the idea. Therefore, an embodied soul is always in difficulty with the unmanifest, both at the time of practice and at the time of realization. Every living soul is particularly independent, and one should know for certain that this unmanifested realization is against the nature of his spiritual blissful self. One should not take up this process for every individual living entity. The process of Krishna consciousness, which entails full engagement in devotional service, is the best way. If one wants to ignore the devotional service, there is the danger of turning to atheism. Thus, the process of entering attention on the unmanifested, the inconceivable, which is beyond the approach of the senses, as already expressed in this verse, should never be encouraged at any time, especially in this age. It is not advised by Lord Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Okay. So there are two paths. Path of impersonalism is troublesome and very difficult, Krishna says. And the two groups of transcendentalists, Bhakti Yogis and Jnana Yogis. Those who are in full Krishna consciousness and serving the Lord, they follow the Bhakti Yoga process, which is direct, the process of being direct service with the Supreme. And Bhakti Yoga accepts the deity of Krishna as worshipable because there's some bodily conception fixed in the mind which can thus be applied. The Jnana Yogis, who follow the inconceivable, unmanifested, impersonal feature of the Lord, what happens to them? For them, the process is very troublesome. It is very difficult to simply theoretically understand that one is not this body. Again, further explaining what is the difficulty in practicing and realizing for the impersonalists. They have to understand the unmanifested representation of the Supreme. The process is difficult. You have to study the Vedic literatures, Upanishads, learning the language, understanding the non-perceptual feelings, and it takes the risk of practicing difficult path, and the goal is not clear. We don't know. Sometimes, at one time, I was slated to, do CA or MBA. These were two options. And my aunts told my father, listen, MBA, at least to get him into the college, he'll come out as an MBA. CA, you put him in, he'll go for all articleship. You never know, he may never pass and come out as a CA. What is better? He said, do MBA, that's better process. So sometimes we have to assess which is the better process. Here Krishna says, as an impersonalist, you will do everything. Yes, ultimately you may reach the same goal, but the process is so difficult and you are not sure about success. So that's why he says it's partial realization. And even after that success, you are only realizing that Satchid, not the Ananda form of the Lord. Jnana Yogi may come to the point of Bhakti Yoga by grace of a devotee. Only by the mercy of a devotee, you can get into Bhakti Yogi. Bhaktiyato Ananyaya Shakya. Unless we come finally to that Bhakti position, also you will not realize. But still, long practice of impersonal becomes a source of trouble. And they cannot give up that idea of impersonalism. So unmanifested realization is against the nature of the spiritual, blissful self. Okay? Then he says, what is the best solution? The best solution involves full engagement in devotional service. One wants to ignore this devotional service, there's danger of turning into atheism. Because Advaitavad sometimes, is in the borderline with atheism. I'm God also. Okay? You start looking at it from all those angles. The advantages for a personalist, what is it? Practice-wise, it is a simple practice. Simply chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, read Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, under the guidance of a spiritual master, by offering regulated obeisances to the deity, hearing the glories of the Lord, eating uchishta, eating prasad, Krishna prasad that is offered to the Lord. And then there is no risk or trouble because they are approaching the Lord directly and the Lord also helps. They have complete realization of Sat, Chit and Ananda. Very joyfully, blissfully performed. The other one, you see the yogi sitting in that pose and troublesome yogic postures. Here, joyfully singing, dancing, eating Krishna prasadam. That's the interesting thing of the Hare Krishna moment. You go everywhere, it is chanting the names of the Lord, singing and dancing, and whatever is offered to the Lord, then you eat nice, sumptuous Krishna prasadam. It is complete from all ways. Right. Then he says, if surrender or bhakti is ultimate goal, then why to take the trouble to understand what is Brahman, what is not Brahman, spend one's whole life in that way, and with the result being doubtful and anyway being troublesome. So deity worship is not idol worship, which he's saying here. There are various references in scriptures. Saguna or nirguna, the supreme possessing or not possessing attributes. Worship of the deity in the temple is saguna worship because the Lord is represented by material qualities. Absolute nature of the Lord, the form of the Lord, although represented by material qualities like stone, wood, is not actually material. Though we make the Lord with that, the Lord's prana pratishtha has done. So he is not only considered as a person, as just a wooden doll. No. An analogy, deity worship compared to a mailbox. As Krishna has given, Srila Prabhupada has given this beautiful example of a mailbox. So you see the red color mailbox anywhere in the streets. Nowadays, I think they are all not there. Post office itself, we don't know what is going to happen. But you see those mailbox and you put it there, the postman comes, picks up the mail and goes, and he drops it also to you. You won't put it in any box. So when you know it's an authorized box, you put it there. So in the temple, in the form of a deity, as Krishna is sitting, Srila Prabhupada says it is an authorized post box. You can go and put it there. And it definitely reaches the Lord. The Lord has that capacity. He's allowed that decentralization to go ahead and do that. And then that's very important analogy that's being given there. And then the Lord is omnipotent. He can accept the services in Archa Vigraha form just to make it convenient for the man, right? So nowadays you have ATMs. You have a bank and you have ATMs that are there everywhere. And you also have it online. Sitting at home, you can do all the transfers. So the Lord has also made it possible for him to expand into this Archa Vigraha form, worshipable form, in such a way that when you worship the Lord in this form, it is exactly like worshiping the Lord in person, directly. That understanding we should have. And the deity is authorized representation, known as Archa Vigraha, the form of the Lord that is worshipable, that is suitable for worship, almost like the Lord is personally present with you, right? Hologram, as we say, you know, Prime Minister Modi speaks, and in every house it comes on TV, it is authorized that he is speaking to all of us, like that. So the deity is an incarnation of the Supreme Lord to accept service from the different living entities. And what's the comparison of it's very beautiful part. We just close here today with this, when we cover what is the comparison of the personalists and the impersonalists. The impersonalists, they meditate on formless. So it is difficult for the embodied, because we have a body, it's difficult to worship on a formless. But the personalists worship on the form of Krishna, Radha, Narsimha, Vamana, Vishnu, Parthasarathi, etc. And the unmanifested is beyond the senses. You know, impersonalists, the senses are restricting us. You can't think beyond. But the senses can still perceive the deity and the sound of the mantra. So we can engage your senses of touch, smell, taste, etc. in the service of the Lord. And for impersonalists, it is a must for them to understand the Brahman through Upanishads, learn the language, etc. Here, simple chanting. Long practice makes it difficult to take bhakti. So for these impersonalists, very long process of worship. And for us, it is completely natural, because we like to have it in an easy format. Wake up, chant the names of the Lord, dress the deities, bathe the deities, cook for the deities, offer to the deities, eat Krishna Prasadam. Very, very, very natural. What we do in our day-to-day life, you can convert it very easily into devotional life. And then impersonal form is very troublesome. But here, because you are connected with Krishna, it becomes easily. Susukam kartumavayam, Krishna says earlier. Susukam kartumavayam, very easily. Sukh ke saath kar sakte ho. And depends on our own endeavor. But here, see, in the impersonal form, you are completely dependent on your endeavor. You have to work, you have to do this, you have to do that. And then you may be blessed by the Lord. But here, you're worshipping the Lord. The Lord is also lending a hand to you. Ye yatamam prapadyante tam stateva bhajamyam. You take 2 steps, the Lord takes 10 steps towards you. So it makes it easier, because Krishna is also holding your hand and guiding you here, directly or through the Guru. So that is why this process becomes easier. And then in the impersonal form, Brahman form and Bhagavan form, what are the other differences in terms of realization? The first is in the terms of practice, and here is in the form of realization. Here it's nirguna, without qualities, but here it is saguna, with form and qualities of the Lord. Because the Lord has qualities. You can't say the Lord is without qualities. So but in the impersonal form, you are missing all the aspects of the qualities of the Lord. Okay? Then inconceivable, but the process, it possesses inconceivable potencies. Bhagavan, you know, we understand that Bhagavan, Krishna, has inconceivable potencies. He's got all the strength. He is completely omnipotent. Then Brahman is all-pervading, but Bhagavan is all-pervading by energy and as a super soul in everybody. And the Brahman is unchanging, fixed and immovable. Here also he is unchanging, fixed and immovable. The Brahman cannot perceive any opulence because of lack of activity. The impersonal form, it is meditation, lack of activity. Here, Krishna possesses 6 opulences, all in full. Aishwaryasya, Samagrasya, Viryasya, Yashasha, Shriyaha, Jnana, Vairagya, Yocheva, Shadvidam. So 6 types of opulences Krishna possesses. You can enjoy all of those by seeing and relishing that. And in the impersonal Brahman, risk of not realizing the absolute truth at the end. But here success is granted, guaranteed, as nothing is lost. You take 10 steps towards Bhakti Yoga, that counts in your bank. You never fall down. You can only progress beyond that. And in the Brahman form, you may realize the eternal Sat and knowledge, Chit aspects of the original nature, which is partial, because the full is Sat, Chit and Ananda. But here you realize as eternity, knowledge and bliss includes Brahman and Paramatma realization. Sat, Chit, Ananda is fully recognized. So we close with that. The next week when we take it, we will cover this as well. Go on. Now, let me ask whether you have any questions. How do you want to progress from now? We are already 8:20. Any comments, questions? We can have a discussion.
Prabhu, I have one small question for you, please.
Yes.
Right. Prabhuji, chanting shaloks in a day, any time of the day. I asked this question before, and you said that you can chant any time of the day. There's no special restrictions or way of doing it.
Yes.
But chanting, let's say, Chatur Shaloki in a day, any time of the day, does that consider as a part of Bhakti Yoga, or like chanting, like for me, I feel quite peaceful chanting, but does that count as a Bhakti Yoga?
Yes. You're chanting the words of the Lord. And you are, the meaning of that particular verse also, if you understand what the Lord says is apply your mind on me, work for me, do this for me, do that for me. So while you chant the shlokas, that's where it is important. One is chanting, just memorize and chant. Even doing that is great because they are words that are spoken from Bhagavad Gita directly. But once you even understand the meaning of those verses that you recite, even that emotionally, you will be connected to what Krishna is telling and what you're doing, rather than only mechanically chanting. So it is also important for you to understand the meaning of those verses. So, mat chitta, mat gata prana, bodhayantaha parasparam. Krishna says, apply your mind always in thinking of me. Mat chitta, mat gata prana. Apply your entire life to serving me. And always, bodhayantaha parasparam, always talk to each other. When you talk to your sisters, when you talk to your friends, relatives, talk to them about Krishna. So also applying what the shloka means is important, but merely chanting the shlokas itself is Bhakti Yoga, do not worry.
Right. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Any other comments, questions?
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Ghanshyamji.
Hare Krishna.
This is a very, very important chapter, and the first few verses are very, very important because we are all confused about what is impersonalism and what is personalism, what is Jnana Yoga and what is Bhakti Yoga. This gives immense clarity.
Okay, Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Ghanshyamji.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Hare Krishna. Ekam Shastram Devaki Putra Geetam Eko Devo Devaki Putra Eva Eko Mantraha Tasya Namani Yani Karmapi Ekam Tasya Devasya Seva Tumeva Mata Cha Pita Tumeva Tumeva Bandhuscha Sakha Tumeva Tumeva Vidya Davinam Tumeva Tumeva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Krishnaya Vasudevaya Hare Paramatmane Pranata Klesha Nashaya Govindaya Namo Namaha Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanura Mardhanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Katyayani Mahamayi Mahayogini Nanda Gopa Sutam Devi Patimme Kurupe Namaha Shri Krishna Sharanam Mama Dasoham Krishna Tavasmi Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Thank you all. Have a nice weekend.
Hare Krishna.
Catch up next week.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for the beautiful